I might not be the smartest person in the room, even though I'm here alone, but it doesn't take a genius to realize that power and condition damages are just different. As it's usually the case, entire discussion starts with a take as hot as Joe Max Dingleberries. GW2 is poorly balanced. I know, shocking. There's more cancer in this game than in Cancridae family of crabs, but we can't allow that to shroud our judgment if we want to accurately and meritorically pinpoint whether damage types in GW2 need some attention. First, we need to figure out upsides of both damage types, and whether one or another is favored in the game mechanics. And to do that, let's first imagine you're alive.
It is good there to be not dead!
What are your options to keep yourself alive against either type of damage? Starting with boons, as there's the least variables here. Protection and resolution work the same against respective forms of damage. Nothing strange over here. However, when we move into debilitating conditions, we notice the scales start to shift. Slow and weakness affect power and condition damage builds differently. If a power build opens up on you, slow will affect every single instance of damage it pressures you with, while against condition build, slow will only affect pace of condition application, not the individual ticks of damage you suffer from already applied conditions. Which in case of some condition builds like Mace Condi Berserker, which apply majority of the conditions in singular button press, that slow won't be nearly as useful as against anything power related. Of course, there are outliers, like Elementalist's Quantum Strike, which is a power skill that acts almost exactly like Condi attacks do, and also there are, well, one-shots. However, I happened to headbutt a concrete pillar one time too few not to spot a glaring difference between few outliers and the general rule of how all condition damage in the bloody game works. Weakness is even more skewed against power damage users, as it makes every other attack from afflicted target a glancing blow, which deals half the damage and cannot critically hit. As you can probably guess, power builds rely on critical strikes much more than condition builds do, as critical hit from power build often does over twice the damage regular hit does, and there are traits increasing damage of critical strikes exclusively. On top of which, weakness doesn't affect condition application at all. Even outliers, like Arms Condi Berserker, aren't as negatively affected by losing crits as average power build will, as condition application related to critical hits is very frequently one stack of bleeding or something similarly inconsequential in comparison to rest of build's damage output. Further down the line we go into the dilemma with stats themselves. Vitality, that is health, affects of course all types of damage. Toughness and its subsidiaries, however, are completely ignored by all condition damage, making everything that increases toughness an anti-power only tool. There may not be many traits and skills that directly increase toughness, unless you play Necromancer, but the sheer fact that there's an entire attribute dedicated to ruining the fun for power builds, while there's no equivalent reducing condition damage, does in fact paint rather clear picture. Even further, there exists a certain number of defensive options that work exclusively against power damage. Endure Pain, Signet of Stone and Rite of the Great Dwarf, for example. Of course, there exists a number of skills that reduce incoming power and condition damage equally, like Infusing Terror, Signet of Judgment or Vengeful Hammers to name the few. But for every effect reducing just condition damage, or both damages, there's 3 reducing power damage only, while some of most prominent and highest uptime mechanics, like Grenth Forsaken Death Shroud, are of the kind reducing power damage only, meaning conditions once again have it easier in life. Even further, there's a blanket rule in Guild Wars 2 that hard lockdown skills generally don't do power damage in versus modes. There are of course exceptions to this rule. Power damage exceptions, however, are few and far between, while CC skills that also apply damaging conditions, like Ranger's Spike Trap, Mesmer's Magic Bullet, or Engineer's Rocket Fest Prototype, are much more common, not to mention traits applying damaging conditions on all CC, like Body Blows, Blood Moon, and Insidious Disruption, alongside relics of Akim and Demon Queen, make it obvious there is no rule against condition application on hard lockdown. Even further, some damaging conditions have additional effects, aiding them in pressure. Poison has built-in healing reduction against all afflicted targets. There is no other healing reduction available to be used by a player character. Henceforth, every build that has Source of Poison has Heal Cut. Every build that doesn't have Source of Poison doesn't have Heal Cut either. Healing Cut is a strong utility capable of nullifying enemy sustain and prevent recovery. Strong utility, which is effectively denied from every power build in the game due to it being directly tied to a damaging condition. Other examples of damaging conditions with additional effects are Torment and Confusion, with the latter being much more toxic than the former. Torment simply does more damage against whatever is immobilized. Confusion, on the other hand, is an example of good on paper idea that turns into travesty once applied in practice. Confusion deals very little damage as itself, but if you cast a skill while having Confusion on you, you'll take additional significant chunk of damage. A player that gets afflicted with Confusion needs to either cleanse it immediately or withhold from casting skills, as every action other than cleansing will be punished with damage by the condition. That said, the enemy that put Confusion on you won't stop attacking to let you cleanse it. It is not too difficult to pressure someone into a bad decision, especially if every decision other than cleansing Confusion is in the brief moment a bad decision. Every build that depends on some arbitrary action like hitting a specific skill for cleanse, doesn't have good cleansing utilities, or simply has long cooldowns on cleanses is effectively punished by Confusion for simply existing. As if you can't cleanse Confusion immediately, you'll get punished either by condition eating at your health bar for holding that shield up, or by your opponent for not holding it up. At this point, it starts to look ridiculous just how many privileges condition damage enjoys.
But I'm not done yet!
Power builds get their damaging prowess from 3 sets of attributes: Power, Precision, and Ferocity. Meanwhile, condition damage increases linearly from 1 stat, called appropriately Condition Damage, and non-linearly from Expertise, leaving a room for 1 additional attribute. Here's where the stairs begin to fold. Because condition damage derives from 2 stats instead of 3, Condi builds lose nothing substantial from investing into defensive attributes. A few years prior, Condi builds had to be tankier, as they needed longer time to down targets due to conditions dealing damage over time. However, through the gift of power creep and brilliant ideas like Relic of Akim, cursed be his name, we arrived at the point where some condition builds can down targets off of 1 CC, which isn't a guarantee even for meta power builds. And other Condi builds have mixture of unrelenting pressure and sheer sustain to simply stat check their opponents into the bloody ground. Final piece of offense against condition damage is the fact that Evasion and Block only prevent condition application, not condition damage itself. If you are pressured by a power build and you press dodge or block, you immediately pause the influx of damage for a period of time. If, on the other hand, you press dodge or block against a condition build, you only stop condition applications coming your way, not the damage from conditions already on you. This makes it so you cannot rely on dodging or blocking as forms of damage mitigation against a condition build to the same extent as you could against power build. You may dodge, you may block, but until you burn your cleanse, that condition on you won't stop chipping away at your health bar. Similarly, if you fight a power build, screw up and have to disengage, as soon as you break engagement, you are no longer in direct danger. Against condition build, however, you may run, you may break engagement, but even if your opponent can't chase you down, you are still on fire. And what's funny, every shadow step, leap, dash or teleport you use is a trigger for Confusion to clap your cheeks. So in brief summary, There's much more effects in the game screwing power damage than condition damage, and power damage screwing effects are more broadly applied to the point of one of them being a basic attribute literally everyone has. Damaging conditions come with their own unique effects, like heal cut from poison and built-in pressure from confusion. There is no general rule against condition application on hard lockdown, like there is against hard CC in doing power damage. Differences between attribute scaling for power and condition builds makes the latter significantly easier to build tanky and durable, while on average reaching the same thresholds of killing from one interactions once countermeasures are depleted. Finally, the two most prominent forms of defensive utility, blocks and dodges, are less effective when used reactively at combating condition pressure than power damage, essentially losing value as the fight goes on. To top that, already applied conditions essentially chase the afflicted target, dealing damage to it, no matter how far does it run away, making conferring kills against mobile targets easier for condition builds. That's already a lengthy list, even before we consider the special cases like Necromancer's terror trait allowing fear to deal damage, and the fact that condition builds in general are a little bit more aids in comparison to their power damage counterparts, through a combination of general durability, various debilitating effects they have easier access to, and negative experience deriving from getting slowly Fritz Hubbard into afterlife. All the privileges condition damage has used to be necessary before the power creep settled in, as it took significantly longer time to marinate someone in conditions than to simply bash his face in. Now, however, as Condi damage caught up to speed, only factor keeping it down is the blanket counter to all conditions: Cleanse. Cleanse is simple in concept. It just removes a number of conditions stated on the tooltip. However, it is slightly more complicated in application. A singular condition stated on the tooltip means a singular type of condition. For example, 25 stacks of bleeding is one type, and non-stacking weakness is also one type. That means singular instance of cleanse is the more valuable the more of a singular type of damaging conditions is on you, and less valuable the more different types of conditions you suffer from, creating a concept of covert conditions. That's using weaker, non-damaging conditions in order to shield your main damaging ones from getting cleansed. Similarly, splitting your damage output between few different conditions, like for example applying bleeding, poison and torment instead of just torment, will make singular instance of cleanse less effective at stopping the flow of damage. Furthermore, cooldowns play the role in the equation as well. Frequent access to cleanse like Warrior's Brawler's Recovery or putting sigils of cleansing on both weapon sets is going to undermine efforts of Condi builds over-reliant on singular condition for their damage output. And long cooldown big cleansing skills like Signet of Stamina are good at nullifying bursts of different conditions, like from getting hit with Elixir of Ambition. However, access to cleanse isn't equal amongst all classes, and some can shrug off condition after condition and laugh in the face of their adversaries, while others have to be extremely cautious around as much as denser fart. Entirety of depth surrounding cleanse led to specific mind game forming. As to bait out cleanses from your opponent, you need to apply enough conditions to them to prompt them to cleanse, but not as much as you won't have sufficient amount of damage to capitalize on your bait succeeding. Further, you can capitalize on your opponent holding his cleanse for when it's really necessary, by being patient and applying your conditions gradually, so that there's always something chipping at your opponent's health bar, but not as much at one time to incentivize cleansing. Cleanse to conditions interaction is multifaceted and interesting once you try to explore and understand it. Only noticeable problem with it is that it is forced to shoulder entire burden of keeping in check all condition builds and all conditions across the entire game. Only mechanic reducing condition application affects duration only, and as much as I appreciate its existence, reducing 10 seconds of burning down to 7 won't help if intensity of it dictates I'll die in 5 seconds. In comparison to all the mechanics holding power damage in check, cleanse is simply asked to shoulder too much. Conclusion: Condition damage is in some way overpowered and overprivileged, but it also enjoys having its own dedicated counter, which holds its potential from becoming too bullshit. Unfortunately, that also means said counter is required, which means another mandatory box on a checklist you have to check while making your build, which, similarly to stun breaks and stability, often is too much when you play against regular builds, yet still not enough when you face dedicated condition specialist. If I'm to be asked, there should at least exist an equivalent of soft cleanse. Something weaker than cleanse that could be applied more broadly without as much of an impact of a game, while being able to keep condition damage a little bit better in check. For example, Abate. Remove number of stacks of a number of conditions on you, prioritizing those with highest stack counts. Abating conditions would prioritize holding back damage from ramping up too quickly, but wouldn't remove it entirely, unless you suffer from fewer stacks of condition that Abate removes. It would also go around covert conditions, but wouldn't be as major of an effect as cleansing. You could also put it in more places without making things strictly overpowered. Create making you abate conditions every second you block, or making you abate them every second you have resistance, for example, wouldn't have as much of an impact as cleanse in the same situation would. Hell, making everyone's dodge abate conditions by default wouldn't probably break the game either. Furthermore, strength of abate could be more precisely weighted against its cost. Certain skill could abate 2 stacks from 2 conditions, other could abate 3 stacks of 1, and another could abate 1 stack of every damaging conditions you suffer from. Adding such utility would allow Arena to better balance conditions against their countermeasures, but we'll probably never see it happen. Neither we will probably see Heal Cut be added to non-condition sources, even though Deep Wound from original Guild Wars almost begs to fill this spot. We'll probably never see anything partially preventing enemy from applying conditions, like Weakness partially prevents critical hits, even though it would make sense for such utility to exist, and we will probably never see rebalancing of base attributes to better balance strengths and weaknesses of power and condi builds in relation to one another, as well as the relation between damage potential and durability. Such is our ever more cancerous puddle of rot we got to know and love. Speaking of cancerous rot puddles, we have a Discord server now, which is a bit work in progress, but I'll keep adding features as we go, and for the time being, it'll more than suffice for you to tell me how my opinion is wrong and what piece of cultural media to recreate. All jokes aside, we can all finally cope and clown together in one glorious, unreadable mess of a group chat. Similarly, all the fellow smooth brains in EU servers can now also join our guild. There's also Patreon for all those who want to subsidize the creation process of my dubious quality garbage content. Either way, Bullshit Brigade now officially exists and welcomes all that aren't tired of my bullshit, as there's going to be significantly more of it. And finally, thanks to everyone for liking aforementioned garbage content. Nothing I made or achieved would have any meaning without you. Thank you once again, and crapface out.